It all started when I began suspecting my wife of infidelity. It was after my son Matt's 13th birthday. On my way home from work, I picked up the pictures from the drugstore. Julie wasn't home yet, so I sat down and started going through them. What a wonderful day it had been. Matt was so surprised when we got home, only to find a surprise birthday party waiting for him with all his friends. While looking through the photos, one picture caught my eye, a close-up of Matt and my lifelong friend Steve. Steve and I had been friends since childhood. My kids call him Uncle Steve, and his kids call me Uncle John. That's how close we are. As I stared at the picture, I couldn't help but notice something unsettling. Matt and Steve shared striking similarities. They both had black hair, green eyes, narrow noses, and similar skin tones. If I didn't know better, I'd swear they were father and son. As I continued flipping through the photos, I came across another shot, a picture of Julie and Steve. They were in a very intimate pose, so close that it seemed like they were about to kiss, or perhaps had already. I searched the rest of the pictures for any other signs of them together, but found nothing. I removed those two photos and tucked them away in a drawer in my home office. While it wasn't enough evidence to accuse anyone, I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more going on between Julie and Steve. But before I could think further, Julie walked through the door, kissed me, and went upstairs to change. It was her usual routine when she came home from work, and I'd never suspected anything before. Still, I couldn't shake the growing suspicion. I decided to keep an eye on Julie and Steve. I didn't resort to high-tech tracking devices right away, but I began making a mental note of where Julie said she'd be and finding excuses to check in on her. A few weeks later, a missing girl's body was found in a lake. Her family had already done a DNA profile to identify her, in case the worst happened. That gave Julie the perfect opportunity to suggest something that would help me gather the answers I was looking for. "John, we should get DNA profiles for the kids, just in case something happens and they need to be identified," Julie suggested. "What if one of our children goes missing?" I agreed. It seemed like a reasonable precaution. I took the kids, Matt, Ashley, Hannah, and Sarah, to the office for the DNA tests. I also asked the doctor to provide me with copies, just to keep the files on hand in case I needed them. 2 weeks later, I was out of town for business, and I had the results in hand. I hadn't opened the envelope yet, but as I neared home, I could feel my nerves tightening. When I finally opened it, my world shattered. None of the 4 children were mine. The tests confirmed what I'd suspected. They shared the same father. I knew deep down it was Steve. In a drunken haze, I passed out that night, but when I woke up, I had to know for sure. I couldn't just ignore it anymore. I decided to take action. I went to a local store that specialized in surveillance equipment and bought cameras, sound recorders, and tracking devices. I set up the cameras in every room of the house and installed tracking devices on both Julie's car and Steve's truck so I could monitor them. The information would be sent to a computer in the basement, which I could access with my laptop. On Saturday afternoon, I checked the tracking device for Steve's truck. It was parked at his house, not with Julie. I spent most of Sunday morning going through Julie's things, looking for anything that might give her away. In the back of her closet, I found some sexy lingerie I hadn't seen before. That night, when Julie and the kids returned home, I greeted them with a hug. Later that evening, Julie told me something that threw me off guard. "John, I think I'm pregnant," she said. "Pregnant?" I replied, stunned. She explained she had a feeling and planned to see the doctor soon. I was suspicious, though. Julie and I had tried for years to get pregnant with no success. And now, out of nowhere, she was pregnant again? Something didn't add up. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went to a neighboring town and had a fertility test done in secret. My sperm count was above average, which only deepened my suspicions. It seemed impossible that I couldn't get her pregnant before, but now she was pregnant with Steve's child. I hurried back to work, where I reviewed all the information I'd gathered. The tracking devices showed that Steve had been to work and then driven to a hotel on the east side of town, further confirming my suspicions. Julie's car was at the doctor's office before heading to the same hotel I had seen before. I had seen enough, so I returned to work that evening. Julie was ecstatic about being pregnant and grateful for another child. I couldn't hold back and decided to gather all the information I could, laying it out for her. Over the next few weeks, I gathered more details and discovered they followed a pretty strict routine. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, they would meet for long lunches at the hotel in the same room. I took pictures of them entering and leaving, though I didn't need to know what was happening inside because on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they would meet at our house and sleep together in our guest room. The more I witnessed, the harder it became for me to stay calm. After 2 months of observing them, I recorded a phone conversation that shook me. "Hi, is this a good time to talk?" Steve asked. "Yeah. John's playing golf, and the kids are at a friend's house," Julie replied. "I've been worried about John lately. He's been acting strange. Do you think he might know?" Steve asked. "He hasn't figured it out in 16 years. How could he guess now?" Julie said. "What about Matt?" "He looks more and more like me every day," Steve said. "So what?" "John thinks I'm the perfect wife. He'll never suspect I'm cheating on him, and he'll never believe I've been working for 15 years to only have your kids, not his," Julie replied. "I'm still not sure I approve of that," Steve said. "Take it back, or you'll never touch me again," Julie demanded. "Okay, I take it back," Steve said. "I can't wait until Monday." "Oh, baby, I can't Monday. I have a lunch meeting, a very important case. We'll have to take a long lunch on Tuesday," Julie said. "Okay, what time should I come over?" Steve asked. "Around 11, Julie said. "I'll see you then," Steve replied. I overheard this conversation on Sunday. On Monday, I gathered enough evidence to begin filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and went to see a lawyer. "Okay, John, what reason do you want to use for the divorce?" the lawyer, Dave, asked. "Marital infidelity," I said. "That's hard to prove in this state," Dave responded. "Well, maybe you can tell me if this is enough evidence," I said. "I have pictures of my wife with her lover, videos, several phone conversations about their affair, including one where my wife admits she intentionally had children with her lover and not with me, and finally, a DNA test proving none of the 4 children I raised are mine. Is that enough?" I asked if that would be enough, and Dave replied that it would. He said he would serve my wife with the divorce papers right away. "Can I choose the time and place for when she'll be served?" I asked. "I guess so, but why?" Dave responded. I explained. "She's supposed to meet her lover at our house tomorrow at 11 a.m. Can we serve her the papers at 11:30 or 11:45? Dave seemed to approve serving her while she's committing adultery with a witness. That sounds acceptable. I then asked, would it be illegal if I invited my wife's parents, sisters, a few of her friends, her lover's wife, and maybe their bosses? "Ah, I see, you want a bit of revenge. As long as you tell them it's a surprise for the newborn and they don't know what's coming, it should be fine," Dave replied. "Perfect," I said, as I left the lawyer's office. I made some calls and invited everyone except Mary to a surprise baby shower for Julie. Naturally, Mary would inform Steve, which would alert him, and he'd likely avoid coming. At 10:45 a.m. on Tuesday, I called Mary and asked her to meet me at our house. I told everyone to wait quietly in the yard until we were ready for the surprise. I explained to them that Julie was sleeping at home, and we would sneak in and catch her off guard. Dave had the divorce papers in hand. We quietly entered the house and headed to the guest bedroom. I opened the door and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" The room quickly filled with shocked faces, and the hallway was crowded with surprised onlookers. Mary immediately started yelling at Steve. Julie's family began yelling at her, and Julie started yelling at me. Steve tried to grab his clothes and run out, but his boss blocked the door and fired him. Amidst the chaos, Dave calmly approached Julie, who was lying on the bed crying under a sheet. "Julie Davis, you are hereby served with divorce papers filed by your husband, John Davis. He is seeking a divorce on the grounds of adultery. Mr. Davis is not requesting custody of the 4 children born, nor of the child you are currently carrying, as DNA tests have confirmed that he is not the biological father of any of them. Additionally, a recorded phone conversation between you and one Steve Wilson suggests that you deliberately prevented Mr. Davis from getting you pregnant in order to have children with your lover. Mr. Davis is seeking 90% of all jointly acquired assets. If you do not accept these terms, a court date will be set. Have a good day." Dave delivered his message in a loud, emotionless tone, almost robotic. He handed the papers to Julie and walked out. Both Julie and Steve lost their jobs. Steve divorced Mary, and Julie's family, who had always been supportive of me, disowned her. I didn't get the full 90% in the divorce. I settled for 75%, but in a separate lawsuit, I secured a settlement from Steve for alimony. I loved Julie deeply, and if I had confronted her immediately upon suspecting the truth, it would have shattered me. Knowing the full extent of her betrayal made it easier to cut her out of my life. I still see her around town occasionally, and every time she tries to apologize, I refuse to listen. She cheated on me for years, deliberately prevented me from fathering her child, and made me believe I was the father. Had I not loved her so much, I might have wished for her death. But despite all the hurt, I can't forget the good times we had. The children were devastated to find out that Uncle Steve was actually their biological father and that their cousins were now half-siblings. They all spent a lot of time in counseling to process it, and I deeply regret how this affected them. However, it was just another form of Julie's revenge. She wanted Steve's children, not mine, and now she has to live with the consequences of her actions, as the children harbor resentment toward her. They still call me Daddy whenever I see them.